Joining us now on the podcast, a couple of friends from our friends over at the Laurel Springs School. First, let's introduce someone currently a kindergarten teacher at Laurel Springs. Please welcome onto the show Mrs. Colleen Francisco. Mrs. Francisco, welcome. How are you doing here today?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm doing great.
Oh, it is great to have you. Of course, it is great to be joined by your colleagues as well. One of them joining us here currently, the social studies teacher for the upper school program at the Laurel Springs School. Let's welcome on Dr. Elizabeth Contreras. Dr. Contreras, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having us.
Oh, it is, again, wonderful to have you. And, of course, last but certainly not least, currently an English teacher for the upper school. Welcome on to the program, Dr. Kelly Sperduto. Dr. Sperduto, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking, and thanks for having us.
No, it is wonderful to have each of you. And as I was joking with you before, it's been a while since I've been surrounded by this many teachers. Please don't detain me after school. I promise I have completed my homework. I promise there are no infractions of the honor code on my end. So it is great to have all of you. And obviously we are so appreciative of the support we have gotten from Laurel Springs, a program we know so many athletes in our sport use to help better their experience, to help better prepare themselves, whether it be for college athletics, whether it be for pro opportunities in the future. And, I want to learn more insight about why this pathway has proven so successful for so many. And, I know the biggest hesitation for so many, online versus in person. How does that differ for a student's experience? How can a teacher generate a connection with a student who they rarely, if ever, will meet in person? And I want to start with you, Mrs. Francisco. And I hope it's okay that I use the teaching names, because I could hear my mom yelling at me after she hears this podcast if I don't. So particularly with younger students, Mrs. Francisco, how do you go about building that connection to the point where they become comfortable in this program?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really important, all grade levels, to build relationships with our students, but not just with our students, also with our families. My kindergartners are not emailing me back. So I'm creating relationships with kindergartners, yes, but also with their parents or learning coaches. Many times parents will ask us, well, how many students do you have? What is the ratio? And very honestly, our ratio really feels like 1-to-1. We are working with students exactly where they're at, with families exactly where they're at. And so you do truly get that 1-to-1 feeling.
Yeah. Particularly for newcomers into the program, is there always going to be, regardless of age, and I guess I'll direct this one to you, Dr. Contreras, can you tell the difference between someone new to online schooling, someone who maybe went through the kindergarten program and has become more comfortable, and how do you go about, again, acclimating that newer student to where they aren't missing a beat come whatever year they do join?
That's a very good question. So it is pretty clear when somebody is new to the online program versus when they've matriculated up from elementary school, because once they get to high school, if they started in elementary, they know what to do. They know how to keep their schedule. They know that, yes, we are flexible, but it doesn't mean we don't do our work on time or on a timely schedule that works for them. So for new students, we all send out welcome emails, and then a few days after that welcome email, I send a getting to know you email that has more information about me, fun facts like that I like Minecraft and that type of thing. And then, I'll ask them, are you new to Laurel Springs? How long have you been at this school? And then based on their answers, I help them out, and I have a third email I will send, and that also comes along usually with a phone call home that says, here are some tips. There's a great study pacing schedule that one of our teachers, Jessica Ramito, made that really they can plug in their timeline into a spreadsheet and it populates it for them. And so I say, these are the things you can do. Come visit me in office hours. And I really try to just email back and forth about silly non-school related things for as long as the conversation goes on with that student, and that makes them feel more comfortable with me. And it also gives me a touch point for if they fall down a well or off the radar, I can be like, hey, how's tennis? Or, hey, how is riding going? And I know them as a person and they know the things I like to do. And that personal connection, I think, is really helpful. And like Mrs. Francisco said, there are some high school students that my relationship is with their parents. And there are some that my relationship is directly with them, and some that I have had for multiple years. And that's a really special thing I think about Laurel Springs is you can have the same teacher in the upper school for 4 years because we cover such a wide variety of subjects and grade levels. And that's always fun when we get to really, I've worked with one student for 4 years now, which is just super fun.
Yeah. Two follow-ups off of that. One to Mrs. Francisco's point earlier, excuse me. I'm very happy the kindergartners aren't emailing back. I know they're a lot further with technology now than I was back then, but that's very good to hear. And yeah, by the way, listeners at home, this is the second point. They don't get to see this. Here's how I know I'm working with professionals today. It's a 4-person podcast. Whenever a teacher isn't speaking, they mute themselves. And just what experts. It's a nuanced thing, but just know on my end, I'm so appreciative, and the listeners need to know how appreciative I am of that fact. So a shout out to all of you. And, Dr. Sperduto, I'm going to lean on my own experience here. Sorry, Mom. There are more times than I would like to admit where I would show up to an English class in particular. And, if we're talking phonies, I don't need to read Catcher in the Rye. I know phonies. I can have a discussion and maybe get away with it in the contours of a broader class-wide discussion. How does the online experience bring more accountability, I suppose, to a scenario like that?
Well, it all depends, I guess, on the student. But I will say that, if you're engaged with your teachers and you really do have that, like Mrs. Francisco said, a one-on-one connection, it is much more challenging to be phony when it's just you and the teacher and the material, that you're dealing with. And the same with the course in general. It's a challenge to cheat it, if you will, because it's just you and the course together. It's not like you can hide behind that kid in the class that answers all the questions for you. It's just you there working on it, which is great. For a lot of our young ones, they learn that they have to kind of step up and own what they are doing, and that they can't hide behind, someone or expect someone else to do it for them. So I think the fact that it is an online program actually supports that ownership of the course and the material and all of that.
Yeah, and just a follow-up on that to you, Dr. Sperduto, because similarly, and I feel like for your topic in particular, this is prevalent. I can remember specific examples. There's one student, he's not going to listen, Sid Chand, when in English class I was in, made a point, and I remember being like, that's how you interpreted that? Am I just not, I got to get my act together, because that's for sure how you should have interpreted that, Alex. And again, that class-wide experience is a valuable part, certainly, of being in school. How do you go about replicating that for your topic?
Yeah, that can be troublesome when you're dealing with, an asynchronous online program. That you could be a student that does everything on your own, and maybe that's what you want. Obviously, we have weekly workshops that can support that, where we have groups of students working together. We try to build in online discussions amongst the classmates, and sort of, this might not be the right word, but kind of force them to interact with each other. And then, of course, our teachers themselves can set up those situations. Because of the flexibility we have, we're able to say, hey, John and Mary and this other person that I can't think of a name for, y'all are all free on Wednesday during my office hours, and y'all are all having a struggle with this poetry that we're reading. Come here and let's all meet together, and we're going to have a chat. And I've done that with a bunch of students when you find that they need that give and take with their peers. And again, because of our model and the flexibility, we're able to do a lot of things like that.
No, I love to hear that, particularly with the thought of so many student athletes who use Laurel Springs, who, because they need that sort of flexibility, again, based upon their schedule, they may be on a similar path, they may be on a different path in the course of the course. And so I'm curious, as it relates, Dr. Contreras, to a topic like social studies, which can obviously be broader. And I mean, look, you can get to covering, history's not going to move. Like, you can get to it when you're going to get to it. How do you go about adjusting when someone's, again, non-academic pursuits interfere with their timeline of their academics?
That's a really good question. So we do a lot of pace checking with students and setting up pacing schedules with students. And a lot of times I'll say, do you want a pacing schedule? And they'll tell me, yes, I do. And I say, when do you want to finish? And they tell me when they want to finish. And I say, okay, so you have 15 weeks left, right? You have 35 assignments. You need to get this many done in a week. And to Dr. Sperduto's point, we also have some rock star students that are really engaged in helping each other. And I have one in particular that set up an AP US History study group on his own, and it's on a Google chat. And he asked me to send it. I broadcast it to my APUSH students. I sent it to all the other AP US History teachers, and he's like leading reviews with kids on his own time. And so they do have a whole community that's all across the world that they are engaged with each other, even outside of what we see. And like Dr. Sperduto said, in the upper school, we do have workshop meetings for the academy that meet weekly, and that gives us some of that face-to-face. But the good thing is that they can engage with coursework at a time that works for them and with their peers and teachers at a time that works for them too, within boundaries, like not at midnight, but outside of the, in the working hours, we're always available to them. So it's helpful.
Now, I'm very, very relieved it's still referred to as APUSH. I mentioned to each of you, I have a story for you all later that may involve a curse word. It involves my APUSH teacher, so we'll get back to that, I promise. But no, to that pacing, particularly as it relates to early education, fascinates me. And I'm curious, Mrs. Francisco, because, the idea of, again, someone younger, the attention span may be slightly more limited than later in their academic life. How do you approach that pacing model as you approach early education?
It is interesting because even in our K-5 lower school, there's a very different approach for fifth grade than for kindergarten. I do have some kindergartners that really love math and don't love other subjects as much. And so they work a lot faster in math. It is more of like you have to encourage them in other subjects. But that's also the beauty of this program, is that it is okay to also do that. It's okay to, like, quote unquote, work ahead or work faster in things that you're passionate about or you're excited about. And we have students that maybe they're in like their grade level, like let's say fourth grade English, but they're working ahead on fifth grade math or working in different ways. And honestly, pacing, I think in elementary is a lot of like getting to know the student and getting to know the family. Because we are so flexible, families do have interesting ways to work. And so it's encouraging them in the way that's working for them.
An interesting thought off of that is, I wonder, and if your experience, Ms. Francisco, if this has been true, you think it allows a parent to see their child's academic interests faster? Just because, to your point, it's if they're pacing ahead at math, it's like, oh, okay, this is maybe something we need to examine further.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of our flexible program, is that it allows parents the ability to see how their students learn, what they like, what they don't like. And we do have some families that the parents don't work with the student. They have a learning coach, but that learning coach is still really closely connected with the parent, which is allowing them the window into that.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I mean, again, how can you not relate it to your own academic experience? Thinking about it, I'm sure everyone tuning in is and wondering, oh, how might my pursuits have been different had I had that pathway from the beginning? And certainly, again, as it relates to a lot of our listeners, whether they are the tennis player themselves or they are the parent of an aspiring tennis player, that schedule can be arduous because there are tournaments in December, then in January, then in February, March. There is no break on the calendar. And inevitably, should you find success, you might be on the road for 3 weeks consecutively, inevitably falling behind. And I'm curious, when that happens, Dr. Contreras, are there signs? Can you notice if a student is falling behind? How would you go about addressing that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we can notice because we follow our students and we all track our students and we know where they are in the course and where according to their target due dates, they quote unquote should be, right? But like Mrs. Francisco said, students can engage in courses however they want. So some students, oh, front load their physics because they either love it or hate it and they get it out of the way. And then they come back to A push at the end because they love it or hate it, or the other social studies courses or English or whatever. So the key is to know what's going on with students. So I always try to make sure I know, okay, so you're going to front load and do science and math, and then in a month you're going to check in with me. And so I always put that in, but I still send them like, hey, I saw this funny YouTube video. What do you think about it? So that I'm constantly like, we are interacting with each other about something that doesn't matter at all. Lottery is always a fun one, but like, so that, and then I'm like, send me pictures of your tournaments. What's going on? I would love, can you tell me about tennis? And they become my teachers. And I feel like I have never stood, okay, I have tried to play tennis, but not successfully, but I can talk tennis now. Like I'm really good at it, and it's because of my students. So by having that relationship and by we all have our pacing and our tracking and we know where they are and we will bother them like bees to a flower when they are falling behind and our buzzing does get in their ears and they will either say please help me or yeah I got this, don't worry about it. So it just once again is a highly individualized, high touch relationship with your teachers, probably more than any brick and mortar that you could have. So,
No, I love to hear that. I had a teacher in my life, Mr. Greenwald, our college counselor, who happened to be my advisor. And that's the equivalent of homeroom teacher in my version of upper school back in the day. And about once a week, my last 2 years, I'd go into his office during lunch, and he pointed out at one point, I'll never forget, it was second semester senior year. I walk in, I go, Mr. Greenwald, here's the thing. And this was probably a week after I made the case that the air conditioning was the most important invention in human history because why go to war when you can sit comfortably inside? And he goes, Alex, whenever you say here's the thing, I know 30 minutes are coming. I really need to work right now. Like, I'll make you a promise. If you don't do this now, I'll come grab you from your last class of the day. Because again, second semester senior year, I'd gotten into Michigan. Wasn't an issue. He actually came and grabbed me. And I was like, oh my God, like, you really are the man. And I don't think he can get in trouble for that now. But all of that is to say, I love to hear that connection between you all and your students. And to get even more granular, Dr. Sperduto, in the instance when a student falls behind, what sort of resources does Laurel Springs provide to help get them back on track at a pace that doesn't overwhelm them?
Yeah, that can be a big part of what we want to do. Like, obviously, we want to meet them where they are as much as we can. And we have a whole network of support for our students, especially our student athletes, because we know they have training, they have travel, they have tournaments, they have so much more than just school every day. So, they're managing a lot, and we have guidance counselors, we have advisors that can be another partner, another point of contact aside from just their teachers. Um, Checking in and managing schedules. The goal, that I have, if I notice that somebody is falling behind, is I want them to feel supported, not like disciplined. You know what I mean? I want to be like, okay, life's throwing you a curveball right now. Let's figure out how we can help you re-engage with what we're doing here. If that means we need to streamline a few assignments, if we need to have a conclave with some of your other teachers and figure this out, we have the ability to do all of that. It's built in to the system that we have. So it works really well with keeping them on track and keeping them supported so that even if they do fall behind, it's okay. Like I know I can get back and I can still have the confidence that I can recover, which is, what my goal is if I ever am faced with that situation, which to be honest, I've been faced with it often. So
Yeah, no, I like it. The conclave of teachers, black smokes means one more chapter, white smokes means we're back on schedule. I like that. See, this is, by the way, why Mr. Greenwald is like, not right now, Alex. He's like, you always got something for me, don't you? But no, and just, again, I'm curious, my last serious question for each of you, and then I promised one fun one for each to end this. But obviously, you guys each have differing backgrounds in your educating experience. And we'll start with you, Mrs. Francisco. Just talk to me about why Laurel Springs felt like the right place for you, what it is about the experience it can offer that appeals to you.
So I taught, like many people did during COVID, in the virtual world. But I worked for a big company that supported many different school districts around the state that I live in. And it was a lot. Like it was just a lot. And there were pieces that were very, very similar to Laurel Springs, but but I did not have a community. And at Laurel Springs, as a teacher, I have a community. Our students also have a community. Like it is truly a school. It is not just going through a curriculum. And yes, we do have families that don't engage in kind of the extras because they are extras. But it's there for people that want it and desire it and kind of crave that. I know our K-5 students love anytime they can get into a Zoom room together. But it's the same for me as a teacher. I want a community to work with as well, and I have that here.
Yeah, I love to hear that. What about you, Dr. Contreras?
I was in brick and mortar until 2015 when my oldest son was born. And then the moment he was born, I quit my job and I stayed home for a year and I was really bored. And I loved being with him. I dressed him up a lot. So now he's like a fashionista. I think I imprinted something on it. I like dressed him up and took pictures of him. So I was like, I need a job, but I want to stay home and I want to keep teaching because it's my passion. And I stumbled across Laurel Springs and I liked the philosophy. This was back in the dinosaur days, right? This was back before we were really what we are today. But I loved talking with the original creator of the school and her mission. And it's a very it was a homeschool based program. And it still has that homeschool philosophy behind it that everybody's different. Everybody can learn differently. And we all believe in this flexible environment, right? So I've had workshops at the library when my power goes down and there was a guy behind me and I have my virtual background, but he kept ghosting in and out of it. And my students know I have young kids and they come in and out sometimes. And so we're just highly flexible. So I can take a trip and go somewhere cool that I want to go to and still work and be with my students and have that engagement that I so missed when I left the brick and mortar. And I will never go back to a brick and mortar and I'll stay at Laurel Springs until, on my last breath or they say, you don't we're not need it anymore because I love it. It's fun and the kids are awesome and the flexibility is fantastic. And it's just a great place and we have a great camaraderie. I know Mrs. Francisco. I know Dr. Sperduto really well. She is the co-facilitator with me with MUN, but I feel like they're both my friends, not only my colleagues. And even though we see each other's heads all the time, I feel like I know them really well, more honestly than I interacted with my brick and mortar colleagues. So it's a very intimate place, Laurel Springs, and it's a great place to be.
I love to hear. What about you, Dr. Sperduto?
yeah, I could echo probably everything that Dr. Contreras and Mrs. Francisco said. The same kind of flexibility that our students desire, which is why they come here, is what we wanted too, or at least what I wanted. I was in the same boat as my colleagues here. I was teaching for, I think, 15 or 16 years, and I love it. I love doing it. But there came a time where it was, I want to do something different. And it actually sort of fell into, I was studying something at the time, and I was studying motivation and like self motivation, and I stumbled across Laurel Springs, and I was like, this could be a part of my research. And it started that way. But then once I started, actually interacting with the curriculum that they have, and coming on full time with some of the amazing teachers, I was like, this is an incredible school. And then I was just like full on board. I am like the biggest Laurel Springs cheerleader. I run around and tell everybody about what I do and how amazing my job is, and everyone's super jealous. But I'm in the same boat. That flexibility, and yet still, even though we're not in the same building together, I do really feel like we make some really solid connections with each other and with our students. Maybe it's because we're seeking them so much, but we really do make some good connections, and that's the whole point of this job anyway. I mean, I like poetry, but let's be honest. I'm here because I like helping kids grow up and be awesome. So,
No, I love to hear that. And I actually lied. I have one more serious one for you because I really like the answer I got from head of school Alyssa Tormelo when I asked her this question. The biggest misconception when you talk with others about online schooling, because I am sure there are many of them you hear. We'll go in reverse order this time. Dr. Sperduto, what do you think is the biggest misconception you consistently come across?
I guess one of the biggest things I come across is when you think of online school, a lot of people think that it's just a kid locked away in their room on a computer doing like multiple choice assignments and then submitting them and getting, I don't know, a rubber stamp kind of diploma. I think that's the biggest misconception that I try to, when I tell everybody about how awesome my job is, that I try to say like, no, 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 it's not like that at all. It's so cool, and we do this and we do that and that. But yeah, that's my biggest misconception, I think.
I like to hear it. Dr. Contreras?
I think mine is a lot along the same lines as her. And I actually had a lady that talked to me the other day, and she said online school has all the hard stuff of being a homeschool teacher without any of the good stuff. And I was like, that's a really weird thing to say. And I have did work at another online program briefly, and it was not what Laurel Springs is. And I think the biggest misconception is what Dr. Sperduto said, that there's no social interaction, right? That kids are isolated from each other. They don't. And that's the biggest question we get when new parents or prospective families are coming. Is my child going to be able to socialize? And I think that this is how I see it. Laurel Springs has all the good things about high school or elementary school without the horror of the cafeteria, like, or bullies or any of the social negatives that come along with being in a brick and mortar, because you don't have to walk into the high school cafeteria and not know where to sit because we don't have one. So if you go and you join a club, you're going to be with nice kids that just want to hang out and be there with you. And we have, like I said, they have all these chat groups with each other, and they are socializing. And like I had two students in workshop that both live in Minnesota, and one girl knows the other girl's tennis partner. And like, it's like, wow, okay. So they make these connections. And like I said, I have kids whose friends are all over the world. So one girl's going to school in Taiwan next year for university, and one of her best friends is from South Korea that she met at Laurel Springs. So he's going to school in Australia, but they're going to meet up before they go. And it's like, you know, I went to brick and mortar high school. My friends were the people I was forced to hang out with, not like, people in all these cool countries. So Laurel Springs, that's the biggest misconception.
I
You're
love
not going to socialize, but you actually socialize, I think, in a healthier way.
I love to hear that. That's very, very fun. What do you think, Mrs. Francisco?
I think another common misconception is that you have to sit at a computer all day. And I think especially younger parents are concerned about that. Like, I don't want my kids on Zoom all day, or I don't want them staring at a screen or watching. And that's not what it is. Like, there are also hands-on things built in. There are also other projects. There's like, we still have writing. Kids are still writing books and growing plants outside and watching them and doing experiments. It is not on a computer all day. And definitely not just like listening to lectures all day.
Yeah, no, it's again, the more I have learned about Laurel Springs, the more fascinated and appealing it is to me. And certainly, again, appreciate all of you coming on to share insight today. I got one more question for all of you. It relates to my educational experience, and perhaps will offer insight for listeners tuning in as to how you would approach something like this. So, again, fun one for all of you. Here to end it, I promise. I'll start with you, Mrs. Francisco. Not that it's still an open wound in my life. First B I ever got, changed after a while. But for a while, I had a clean sheet. First B and lone B I had for quite some time. First grade, handwriting. And I come from generations of terrible handwriting. My mom's, she's an OB-GYN. The prescriptions she write, I'm surprised they don't just say, here's Tylenol. Like, that's all. We're just going to assume that's a T because it's messy. Dad's might be worse. Little brother holds a pencil like he's Wolverine. Like, there are some handwriting. It's generational. Again, it's hereditary. That's the word I was looking for. Then we made the switch from cursive, which, again, why we learned it, discussion we can get to a program in third grade called Type to Learn. Thrived with that. You put the orange mat on the keyboard, Type to Learn 3 network. I still have the good habits I learned from that. All of that is to say, and again, I warned you, silly questions coming. Are we still teaching cursive? If so, why? Or have we made the move to Type to Learn?
We do still practice cursive here at Laurel Springs. I'm sorry to tell that to you.
Yeah, I guess I just it's not that I don't get it. It's just it does. I guess are we like? I guess why? That's the question I keep coming back to. Is it just it is still the accepted practice?
So we still practice like handwriting skills in kindergarten and first grade and second grade, and then cursive in third grade. And the idea behind it is that it helps you take faster notes when you're doing something later on in life.
Okay, I like that. Has Type to Learn become a standard practice as well, and as part of the broader handwriting?
That is a great question. Not for us in lower school, but I wish we did use that.
Okay. These are the things we learned along the way. Yeah, it is one of those things. It's like, I don't have to look down. I can feel for it. I feel the lump. I'm like, oh, it's F. Oh, it's J. And the fingers are ready to roll. So, okay, again, silly question number one. Tone has been set. Question number two. This will go for you, Dr. Sperduto. Mentioned Catcher in the Rye earlier. Who could forget summer reading the Odyssey? God, did that, took up the full last week of August. Epic of Gilgamesh might have actually been freshman history, but boy, did we dive into it. We also, one of my favorites that I won't forget, it was a comic-centric English class as an elective I took in 11th grade. And we read this book called Mouse, which is a story in comic books of a Polish Holocaust survivor, and he tells the story through the prism of mouse depictions. It's really good. Is that still on the curriculum? Like, what are we going with nowadays?
Oh, all of that is still on the curriculum. Let me just say. So, I have ninth and 10th grade almost exclusively. Okay. And they do have like a list of books, sort of required reading. And I always put quotes around required because there's not really anything that's required about it because you can always change. However, that required reading list is those classics. There'll be a book that's like, this is your required book for the semester, and it's To Kill a Mockingbird in ninth grade. And then here's a list of 10 books these are great. You can pick one. That's your other book. Or a kid sends me a message and says, Sperduto, I don't like any of those books. In fact, I've read 10 of them already. Can I read this? And almost always my answer is, yes, you can. I do get excited when they pick the Odyssey, though, because that's my possible favorite thing in the whole wide world. But yes, there is technically still required reading, and they are those classics that you recall. However, if somebody said, Miss Sperduto, can I read mouse instead of knight?
Sure.
I would say, yes, please do. So that's another one of those, I guess, kind of fun, flexible things that we can do.
No, I love to hear that. Yeah, my dad is an attorney, which I only bring up because I imagine when I was like, you're kind of like Atticus Finch, not knowing what I was saying in 6th grade or 7th, whatever grade it was. He must have been like, yeah, I am. I'm a damn good father. And so, yeah, it's just like, you're welcome for that compliment belatedly. All right, the last picadillo, I would argue, of a question belongs to you, Dr. Contreras, and we mentioned A-Push earlier. That's the scene of the crime for this next story. I had a teacher who happened to also teach my mom, named Mr. Corwin, who had bushy mustache, and he taught A-Push and AP Gov. So naturally, we referred to him as the general. And I remember once, again, mischievous ways, got the whole class to stand up because he had left the class before it had started. So we all stood up, standing, saluting, and waited for him to walk in and salute us down before we all sat for class. And he was just like, you idiots. And I remember, this is where I'm going to swear, the day I walked in, because it was recommendation letter season, and I walked in, and he just looks at me and he goes, you're going to ask me for a recommendation, aren't you? And I just remember being like, yeah, that's where this is going. You know it's going this way. And all of that is to say, that same teacher, here's my ethics conundrum for you. Love Mr. Corwin. Maybe towards the end of his teaching career, a little laxed. And by that, preparation for the midterm exam, I was Googling a previous test question we had for an exam earlier in the semester, and we found a list of questions. And they were all questions that we had on tests throughout the course of that year. And so we're all seeing this, and it's like, next up, midterm questions. And that was our next exam. And so it was like, well, wait, like, I think we've just found the test questions. And so learned them, memorized them, 96 on the exam. Am I in the wrong there for that moment? Or is that on Mr. Corwin for getting sloppy with his question asking?
Okay, how is it that Mrs. Francisco gets the handwriting question, Dr. Sperduto gets what's good to read, and I get is it okay to cheat on your midterm?
I didn't cheat. He was lazy. It's like, it's not as though I went in and searched the questions.
Now, was he? Or was he laying an ethical trap for you? Because he was so ahead of it that he's like, let's see which kids have honesty and which kids are going to take the easy way out. So that's my question back to you, Alex. Was he just that much of a boss and a general of a teacher that he was going to ensnare you? What do you think?
Excellent follow-up, and these are the sorts of conversations you can expect in social studies in the upper school program at Laurel Springs. So this is a taste. I like this. I believe I am in the right here, shocker, because, said with love, someone who generationally can teach both my mother and I, not the most apt at utilizing technology. So what I imagine is that has just been his go-to textbook forever, and he was unaware that that textbook, like many textbooks in 2011, was now available online, and thus it wasn't an unintended ethical question he asked to us. And yes, I acknowledge I took the easy route out. I would point out, like, could have torn apart my essays. It was a 50-50 exam. I did okay on those, so the message got through. But I stand by my actions, I guess.
Hey, you learned something, right? You were able, and that's why we have essays on tests. Because personally, I don't believe in multiple choice, because I think multiple choice, you just showed that you could answer that particular question in that particular moment. Essays are where it's at. So maybe, I mean, you took what I think 99.9% of all students would do, what I did when I was a kid, is I would take my test up to my teacher and argue with them until they answered it for me. So I didn't learn math until I had to study for the GRE, and then I had to relearn everything. And I tell my students that taking the easy way out is going to come back to bite you sometime in your life. So, don't. And our kids are like very diligent. Do we have some that take the easy way? Yeah, but for the most part, they are pretty darn good. And to the handwriting question that I really wanted to answer, now AP tests are online, so they don't have to write them. And as someone who has read A Push for several years, I am so happy because handwriting is like torturous sometimes to read it. And the last one I did, I sent it to my table leader, and he was a guy from Ireland, and he said I had to use lots of Celtic curses to get through this. So handwriting, yes, I believe more in typing. I can't handwrite anymore. I can't write a grocery list because I type all the time. So I have forgotten my handwriting skills.
I like an excellent answer. Excellent answers from all of you. I would point out, got a 5 on A-Push, 5 on AP Gov, both taught by Mr. Corwin. And he said yes to the rec letter. So I thought he did an outstanding job. But yes, I thought you might like that one to end it. Save the best for last, of course. But sincerely to each of you, thank you so much for taking the time, obviously, to join us here today. Thank you to each of you as well for the job you do. There is no more thankless job than educators who, I always tell this to my parents, I would say this to my teachers if I spoke to them more. Like, if 14-year-olds or 12-year-olds had the perspective of 26-year-olds, they'd be like, oh my God, that's what you put up with? But eventually they'll all get there, I promise, and they will feel the same gratitude I know so many parents feel towards all of you now. So sincerely, thank you so much, each of you, for taking the time to join us here today. And obviously, good luck to all of you, and looking forward to hopefully our paths crossing more in the future.